All right. This morning I have a special guest speaker for us today. We've been going through the series or a book study on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and we'll conclude 3rd John here today with my good friend, Bryce. Bryce knows the Lord, loves the Lord. He knows the Word as well as just about anybody I know, has a huge heart for the Lord. He served for years in New Zealand, which, if you want to know where the U.S. is heading, you could look at some of the post-Christian areas. New Zealand's one of them. He served there just sharing the love of Jesus with people and really ministering well. And now he's out here in Texas with us. And you'll notice his accent, his southern drawl. It's from a little bit farther south than Texas. But give it up for the Jesus that's in my good friend Bryce here this morning. Thank you, Bryce. You want me to get you a mic stand?
Nah, mate, I could probably do this. Well, look, I am Bryce. I'm not the Christ, I'm the Bryce. So you will tell as soon as I speak that I'm not from these parts. And, one of the things about having an accent, people immediately distinguishes you as, hey, you're not from here. But people often think I'm an Australian because this accent kind of sounds similar. It's a common mistake you Canadians always make. So if you ever hear an accent like this, you want to say, hey, you're from New Zealand, because 5 times to 1 chance it's actually going to be an Australian, because there's a lot more of them than there are New Zealanders. So if you say, hey, you're a New Zealander, you'll annoy them, which we like, and 2, if you catch the Kiwi, the New Zealander, he'll be like, hey, how'd you know that? So it's pretty amazing. Yeah, so look, I'm going to set up a little timer here. One of the things about America is you tend to talk slower and louder with more intonation and enunciation than us Kiwis do. And Josh said, look, you've got maybe 30 minutes to do a message. Now, in New Zealand, they typically preach 45 minutes, and we talk twice as fast and fast. You wouldn't even understand what we're saying. We're talking like this. So I really got to slow this down and cut my content to try and make that time limit, mate. So we'll see how we go. We are going to be talking about 3rd John. I'll get to that in a moment. Just a couple of facts. New Zealand, if you don't know where it is, it's about 8,000 miles to the southwest, or really southwest of Texas, Dallas here. If you get on a plane and fly there, which you can do on American Airlines 6 months of the year direct, takes you about 15 hours to fly there. Cloyd, I think you said you've been down there. It's not a short flight. New Zealand also is right on the edge of the international date line, so it actually gets the day the first. So right now, it's Monday morning in New Zealand. It's probably about 3:30 in the morning. And so all my relatives that still live there are fast asleep, but they're usually asleep when I talk anyway, so nothing's new. And another thing that it's interesting about New Zealand is that Jesus said in Acts, 1:8, go to the ends of the earth. Well, if you look at where New Zealand is compared to the nation of Israel, New Zealand's almost on the very opposite side of the world than Israel. It's about the furthest significant landmass away from Israel. So I'm sure Jesus had that place in mind when he said that. Another thing Jesus said is, other sheep have I that are not in this pasture, And he must have been thinking of New Zealand, because you probably heard about New Zealand. There's a lot of sheep there. My daughter, actually, she's 30 years old now. She actually married a sheep farmer. And she lives almost in the bottom of the South Island, which is, it's about as far as you can go in New Zealand. So her husband's probably going to get up in about 30 minutes at 5 a.m. and because it's lambing season, and he's going to start helping deliver those little baby lambs. So you should pray for New Zealand. There's 24 million sheep there and only 5 million people. So if the sheep ever attack, we're outnumbered 5-1, mate. So it's better than it used to be. We used to be outnumbered 10-1, but I don't know, lamb's not so popular anymore. Exactly. Now, my wife's an American, but she was a missionary kid. So her parents, when she was 5 years old, they left. They went over to the Fiji Islands to minister. And when she turned 13, they moved down to New Zealand because they wanted to get her into high school. And we ended up meeting a few years after that. And then we ended up dating, getting married almost 38 years ago. So most of her life she spent down under in New Zealand. So she's kind of one of those third culture people, which she's an American, but really most of her life has been spent in my homeland. We have 2 kids, grown kids living down there now. So after we got married, we were married about 7 years, working secular work. We actually ended up getting into full-time Christian work. And we did 25 years full-time Christian ministry in New Zealand. We did 15 years with Campus Crusade, which was working with college, university students. And then in the next 10 years, we worked in a community ministry, Christian community ministry that we set up on our own. And then for the last sort of 6 years, we've been living up here in Dallas because I have a good friend. He is a Kiwi. He moved to America, made a lot of money. He asked me and my wife to come up and work in his family office here. So that's what we do now. And it's kind of great. He's a Christian, and most of our work now is actually distributing money, funds into Christian mission and ministry around the world. So that's how I ended up being here and how I ended up meeting Josh. And so he did ask me to come and preach. We're good friends. But if I upset anybody today, you can blame him. So. Well, look, in our time remaining, we're going to look at the little epistle of 3 John. So it's pretty rare to hear a message from 3 John. It's one of those little New Testament books. It's not preached on very often, maybe because it's short, but also it's sort of overlooked often by some of the other major works like Romans or the Gospels. But let me just give you a couple of little background facts about 3 John. It is the shortest book in the whole Bible. 2 John has got more verses if you look at it, but actually if you count the words, and those verses weren't inspired of the Spirit, they were put in the 16th century. 2 John's got about 245 words compared to about 220 in 3 John, so it is really the shortest little book. It's the only book in the New Testament where the words Jesus Christ are not mentioned, which is kind of interesting. The theme of the book is walking in the truth, and you'll find that the words true or truth occur about 7 times just in those 14 or 15 verses. It's addressed to an individual. His name's Gaius. There are some other books written to individuals like Timothy, Titus, Philemon, but it's the only one by John that's written to a definite individual. I mean, we don't know who the elder of your chosen sister was that you would have done last week, but so it's kind of interesting. Most likely the book was written, or the letter was written to Gaius and was delivered by a guy called Demetrius, who's also mentioned in 3 John in verse 12. Now, the writer entitles himself as the elder, not specifically as John. Now, Josh told me you used the New Living Translation here, but you'll notice when I'm going to read it in a minute, it talks about John, but it actually doesn't say that in the Greek. It just says the elder, to my beloved friend Gaius. But biblical scholars tell us that most likely it was written by John because he's the only apostle that was left alive. They know it's quite a late date that it was written. And John was the only apostle left. And to call himself the elder, not an elder, he's probably very specifically referring to, I'm the last one, mate. I'm the last man standing. So most likely the book was sent from Ephesus, which is modern-day Turkey, and those are those clowns that just beat you guys 3-2 in the soccer last Thursday night. Those dang Turks. Yeah, it happens. And there's some debate whether John actually wrote it from Patmos, which was where he was exiled when he wrote the Revelation, or whether he'd been released and went back to Ephesus, or he wrote it before he went to Patmos. So they don't really know. I like to think that he actually wrote it after. I think they let him out because he was so old. He's the old guy, that they let him out and like, oh, what are we going to do with this guy? You already had the revelation. And if that's the case, then this is the very last words that the Spirit inspired for us to know. And it's a little disappointing because it's a short little book and I'll be like, it's short, it must be not that important. But the last words are usually the lasting words, the most important things that you can have. I remember when I left to come here, I left behind my kids, what are the last words I say before I'm off for living in America, You want to tell them something that you love, you care. These are the most important things. It may not be long, but it's important, significant. And again, he's referring to himself as the elder because he's so old, and I think he realizes he doesn't have much time left. So, very significant book. Anyway, that's a little bit of the background of the book, and I don't know. Let me read it because it's such a short little book. Let's read it from the New Living Translation. It says, "This letter is from John, the elder. I'm writing to Gaius, my dear friend, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I hope all is well with you and that you are as healthy in body as you are strong in spirit. Some of the traveling teachers recently returned and made me very happy by telling me about your faithfulness and that you are living according to the truth. I could have no greater joy than to hear that my children are following the truth. Dear friend, you're being faithful to God when you care for the traveling teachers who pass through, even though they're strangers to you. They have told the church here of your loving friendship. Please continue providing for such teachers in a manner that pleases God. For they're traveling for the Lord and they accept nothing from people who are not believers. So we ourselves should support them so that we can be their partners as they teach the truth. I wrote to the church about this, but Diotrephes, who loves to be the leader, refuses to have anything to do with us. When I come, I will report some of the things he is doing and the evil accusations he is making against us. Not only does he refuse to welcome the traveling teachers, he also tells others not to help them. And when they do help, he puts them out of the church. Dear friend, don't let this bad example influence you. Follow only what is good. Remember that those who do good prove that they are God's children, and those who do evil prove that they do not know God. Everyone speaks highly of Demetrius, as does the truth itself. We ourselves can say the same for him, and you know that we speak the truth. I have much more to say to you, but I don't want to write it with pen and ink, for I hope to see you soon, and then we'll talk face to face. Peace be with you. Your friends here send you their greetings. Please give my personal greetings to each of our friends there. So as I said, this letter is really about walking in the truth. But we could also call this threats to mission. Because 3 John is really a caution, and it's a warning to us as individuals about right and wrong attitudes and behaviors towards the work of evangelism and mission, that great work. And so I guess if you want a title for my message today, I'm going to call it 3 Threats to Mission. There's probably more in here, but again, with the generous 30 minutes that Mr. Reeves gave me, we'll have to trim it down. I think you can also break these 3 threats into 3 specific audiences, and I'm going to call them the old, the young, and the clergy, or the religious professionals. The old being mature people, young obviously probably anybody 30 and under, and the clergy, or your pastors. But we're going to follow the order of the book, so it's actually going to be the old, the clergy, and then the young. We'll look at it that way. So let's talk about the first threat. And this is kind of for people who are mature in Christ, maybe, 40 and up. And I call this the abyss of acedia. Now you're thinking, what's that? You've probably heard of the Gulf of America. More recently, you've heard of the Strait of Hormuz. Huh? It's been in the news a lot. Well, have you heard of the abyss of acedia? You probably haven't, because it's not a geographical place or a location. It's a state of mind that it's very easy for people who, as they mature in Christ, can fall into. The word acedia, it's a rather archaic word. It's a pity we don't use it anymore, actually. I think it's kind of a bit of a loss to the English language, but it's a great word. It comes from the Greek acedia. And if you know anything about Greek, a usually means negative, like atheist, no God. So a is the negative, and kairos is the word care or concern or attention. So it literally means not paying attention or not caring anymore. Absence of concern. And spiritual acedia was really first noted by one of the desert fathers. If you look at Christian history, you'll find there's a guy called Evagrius Ponticus. And he was a monk. He lived in the 4th century out in Egypt in with a collection of other monks that kind of lived out in the desert in these caves, And he developed a list called the 8 evil thoughts. And the thoughts are anger, gluttony, greed, lust, pride, sadness, vanity, and acedia was the 8th one. Centuries later, you might have heard of the 7 deadly sins. You heard that? Well, that actually came from Evagrius' work. They kind of took it in the medieval times and they morphed it and shrunk it down to 7. And acedia then was kind of absorbed into the sin of sloth, laziness. This is a bit sad because sloth and acedia are not quite the same thing. Sloth is just kind of basic laziness. Acedia is just, I don't care anymore, give it up. So Evagrius, he noticed a pattern in the monks of his order. In the early morning, the monks got up, they're all kind of happy, they're ready to pray. The new day, it's refreshing, get a bit of food in them. Prayer came easy to them. And then he noticed in the evening, when the day was finishing, they've kind of done their work for the day, there's a sense of completion, they came together to eat their meal, and hope would kind of return. But he noticed in the middle of the day, when the sun was at its zenith, midday, that these monks started to act differently. They still had many hours of the day left to endure. They had physical fatigue was setting in. They were in solitude and silence, They had a lot of repetitive work. A lot of their work was just copying these scrolls that became the Dead Sea, it was just kind of laborious stuff. And seemingly little progress has been made. And he recognized it was sort of around the midday hour that all the monks started getting this spiritual acedia, losing motivation, losing interest. And he actually called acedia the noonday demon, He actually wrote, the demon of acedia, the noonday demon, is the heaviest of all the demons. And he described what used to happen about that hour. He said, the monks started, looking out the window and looking at the clouds and wishing the day would be over. And they sort of got really tired of this little, what they called a cell. It really was like a cell, a basic hole in the side of a rock with a little table. And they started finding fault with their brothers, grumbling. longing for another life where things could be easier and better for them. So now, well, how does this relate to our text in 3 John? Well, you know, in the history of me coming to America and having a connection with ministry years, I've only ever preached 3 times in America. Today's one of them. The second time before this was about a year ago right here. The only other time before that, I preached in a church in Alta Loma, California, Alta Loma Brethren, Rancho Cucamonga. And it was almost 25 years to the day. And you know what I preached on? 3 John. Now, when I preached that sermon, I was 36 years old. And I mentioned to that congregation, hey, I had, at that time, an 18-month-old son. You know, well, now I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter, you know. Life's moved on. I got some grey hair. And one of the things, as you age, is you begin to realize, hey, death's a lot sort of closer than it used to be when I was sort of 30, you know. My father actually died. He was 60 years old. I'm 61 now. I'm actually a year older than my father. So maybe, who knows, maybe death's not too far away from me with my genetic history. But it's easy to start thinking as you age, well, look, mate, I've done my dash for Jesus. I've worked hard. I've been in the mission field. Yeah, time to kick back, Brycey, you know. Watch some sport. Just, you know, relax, you know. Leave it to the young folk. That's acedia. It's dangerous. And look at John. Here's our example. Here's a guy who's probably 90. You know, he's 30 years older than me. And look how he talks. You read these first 4 or 5 verses. He said, the elder, I'm writing to Gaius, my dear friend whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I hope all is well with you. You know, I hope you're healthy in body and strong in spirit. Why would he be saying that if he's weak and crap? You know, because John probably is too. He said, some of the traveling teachers returned. They may be very happy by telling me about your faithfulness, that you're living according to the truth, and I have no greater joy than that my children are walking in the truth. He's not saying, I've got no greater joy that I got $1 million in my 401k, that I'm going to be retiring in a week, I'm going to be on the golf. Is that what he's talking about? This guy is on fire for Jesus, man. This is what's important, and his concern and care for people is still vibrant. You ever meet those beautiful souls? Especially as you age, there's a lot of things you can't do, you know. Cloyd used to play rugby. You can't do these things. You're sort of like, yeah, you know, kind of enjoyed that. Most things in life decay, and you're not good at it. But you know what? With your spirituality and your Christianity, it can get better and better and better, you know. It's one of the few things that if you really keep going with Jesus, you're going to be more Christ-like, and it'll be evident. And you see this in John. I mean, think about his situation. He was the last apostle, you know. All his friends have gone. They've all died. He's lost even his brother, James. James was the first apostle that was killed probably 60 years before. And if anybody's got sort of a right to say, well, you know, I've done enough, it's probably this guy, John. But he's not like that. You can feel the spiritual vibrancy in this man. Now, he's not just on fire for God personally. You know, it's great, you know. He's on fire for the work of mission and evangelism. And look, I'm assuming we're mostly believers here. You tell me you're doing your quiet times, hey, that's great, you know. You tell me that, you know, you love listening to Christian podcasts when you're driving your work van around McKinney and whatever, Prosper. Hey, great. You love listening to Christian worship when you're vacuuming your house and, you know, you cry. It's beautiful. Well, that's great. Well, where are you at with Christian evangelism and mission? Because it's so easy to become a sort of just personal, spiritual, I'm just doing this for Jesus, thank you so much. You know, it's great. But we're also called to take this message to the world. We're called to take it to our neighbors, to the people we're working with, our sports teams. And John is still on fire for that, you know. You know, about 6 months ago, right here, my house, 2 people showed up on my doorstep. And these are people who take the work of mission very seriously. Not just them, but their whole organization. These people go out sharing their faith on a regular basis. They encourage one another in the work of taking their gospel from house to house. They keep detailed statistics on how they're doing with that. They pray for one another, and they give 10% of their income to that work, to their organization. And we talked for a while, you know, shared some Bible verses. I don't think they liked it when I told them they were 4th century Arian heretics and that they needed to read the findings of the Council of Nicaea of 325. and that they should stop bringing this false gospel immediately, or they're in danger of eternal damnation. But I tell you one thing I do admire about these people is they take the work of mission seriously. Of course, they were members of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, or Jehovah's Witnesses. And, we didn't see eye to eye. I prayed for their salvation when they left. But you got to admire that these people believe in what they're doing. When's the last time you ever had a Christian bang on you and say, hey, look, can I tell you about Jesus? Now, is that the most effective? I don't know. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying these people, I think Josh talked about the Mormons last. they take it seriously, man. Us in the church, especially in the West, we're starting to get this kind of ascetic, it's 2,000 years, mate, we've been doing it. It's time to relax. It used to be a high calling for people to go into missionary service. And today, not many Christian parents in the West seem excited if their kid says, hey, Dad, I want to be a missionary. I was hoping you're going to be a lawyer, son, or maybe a doctor, or have a high-paying salary and look after me and your mum when we get older. In fact, Christian parents are often discouraging their kids if there's any kind of spiritual interest. That's what I love about the young, because they're like, yeah, I want to go do it, But that's acedia. I looked up the statistics of full-time missionaries right now in the world. I don't know who comes up with these names. They're now called the Global North. Have you heard of that? Global North, Global South. We used to call it the Western world and the Third world and this, I don't know. They said the Global North, and here they put North America, Europe, and Oceania. Well, that's in the freaking South, mate. I live there. But anyway, the Global North, 227,000 missionaries right now. The Global South, this is Africa, Asia, Latin America, 203,000. If you work that out, there's about 53% in the north and 47% in the west. In other words, the third world is almost sending out as many missionaries now as the west. What an indictment. With all our money, resources, training, tools. How many Bibles? You probably got 20 Bibles at your house. These third world nations are sending out almost more missionaries. Statistics also tell us the average Christian in the West is only given about 2.5% of their financial resources to the church and to the work of mission. It might even be less. I just read a Baptist Press article dated 9th of April, and it said the average evangelical Protestant gives 1.7% of their money to the church and to mission. Now, I'm not out to preach some legalistic standard of what you should be given. Look, obviously costs have gone up. This war in Iran, gas has gone up. Okay, clearly. You've got to pay a bit more for groceries. My prop tax since I've been here is probably about 40% higher. But is that really the best we can do? 1.7%. Now you contrast that with the attitudes of what John writes here. He says, beloved, there are men going out for the work of the Lord, traveling teachers. Even though they're strangers, they've told the church, if you love, please continue providing for these teachers in a manner that pleases God. In fact, I typically read the New American Standard, but it says, send these men on their way in a manner worthy of God. It's very strong. It's like if Christ turned up on your door and you said, I got a couple of bucks. Is that how you'd want to send out Jesus if he really showed up on your door and he said, hey, Bryce, I'm off to China, or I'm going down to Plano with $2? John is saying, we are partners with these men. We should be partnering with these guys. You may not be called to do it yourself. I think it's a very high calling. I see I did it 25 years, and there's a lot of people I met that shouldn't be doing it. I'm like, get out, mate. You shouldn't be in this. This is not your gifting. But the ones that are in it and are doing it, are we really still getting behind them, supporting them, praying for them, ministering to them? So what you find here in this epistle, John is saying there's this danger of acedia, and you don't see it in John. This guy's sprinting at 90, going on. And I want to be like that, I'm 60. The Lord gives me more years. I don't want to be one of these guys that's off on the golf course. And I used to share the gospel, mate, and did my dash, So that's the abyss of acedia. Minion McLaughlin, she's an American humorist, one of your writers. She said, acedia, or spiritual sloth, was the sin of the Middle Ages. It's the sin of my Middle Ages too. Second threat that I see here against mission is what I call the pit of parochialism. You ever seen that movie, The Princess Bride? Seen that? He talks about the pit of despair, Well, I'm going to talk about the pit of parochialism. Parochial means to be very limited or narrow in your focus, okay, your outlook. Again, it's another Greek word. It's got origins, para-oikos. Oikos means a household. Para means beside, but it means kind of looking around, everything around your sort of house. So acedia was the sin of really kind of not caring for what's close to you around you. Parochialism is really the sin of just looking at what is around you and never widening your gaze, just being really concerned for your own little congregation, your own little ministry. And this is for pastors, preachers, because this is a danger that they can fall into, just looking after their own little thing, and that's it. John says in verse 9 here, he said, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be the leader, refuses to have anything to do with us. Now, that's amazing to me. I mean, we know there's a lot of churches now that you're probably thinking, they're just doing their own thing, and there's a lot of abusive leadership. But man, this guy's an apostle. You've got someone in the first century. We don't listen to those guys, Wow. I mean, that's something else. John says also that the root of that attitude, really, of just looking to the people under his charge, he's been abusive. He's telling them, you're not even allowed to support in your mission outside this church. He will put them out of the church if they did that, And John says that's a great evil. He said, don't let this bad example influence you. You should be following what is good. So look, you got a little congregation here. This is great because, in New Zealand, a lot of churches are more like this. Like my daughter's church got half the people that you got here. It's like, but you never want to be in a place where the pastor says, the only place you need to give is here. Because if someone turns up and says, hey, look, I'm going into this mission field. Can you help me? You're obligated to consider what they say. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to help them, but you're certainly obligated to treat them like Christ has turned up, and you need to look at it and think, what are they doing here, and can we help? Now, of course, Josh would have preached on 1 John, right? Chapter 4. In that chapter 4, it says, look, test the spirits, because many deceivers go into the world. These two guys that showed up on my doorstep, 6 months ago, I didn't give them a dime. Didn't let them in my house. I'm not giving them a drink of water, because they're not of the truth. They bring a false gospel. But you got someone coming to you, and he's a stranger, or I don't know, what's the feminine word of stranger? Strangers? I don't know. And they say, hey, look, I believe God's called me to go to somewhere in China or Mongolia, and you need to sit down and say, I need to pray and think about this, and can I help this person? Maybe you can't. Maybe all your giving's distributed, because it's probably Christ banging on your door. And that great story in Matthew 25? Jesus said, I was a stranger, and you never invited me in. The sheep and the goats. Obviously, we have, we're not, there's only Elon Musk, the trillionaire. Well, I don't have $1 trillion, but you still got something. You need to think about, how am I using this? Where's it going? What am I doing with it? And if before the Lord you've prayed and you know what you're giving to, and you can say with integrity, hey, look, we don't have any funding right now. I'd love to stay in touch. Yeah, let me pray for you. Maybe actually, here's a guy I know. I'll give you his phone number. I'll call him for you. Why don't you go talk to this guy? Maybe he can help you. That's how we should be. But the trap of the pit of parochialism is, oh no, we're just in here, we're locking in here, we got our own agenda, we got our own ministry. I mentioned that I was 15 years with Campus Crusade, and then my wife and I, we set up our community ministry. And one of the things we did as part of our community ministry was we set up a fitness center for the community. And it was a Christian-based fitness center. You didn't have to be a Christian to come to it, but it was run with a Christian ethos. Because I thought about, well, it was easy on campus. I just go talk to students. Well, now I'm in the community. We could go banging on doors, but even then in New Zealand, it's a bit like, hey, get off my doorstep. I thought, where are people going? Well, they go to rugby games in New Zealand, but I'm not going to be able to compete with Eden Park, which is it's kind of like your big, your Cowboy Stadium. I can't do that. They go to the pub, the bar, they drink. Well, I'm not opposed to people drinking. Jesus drank wine, but they're often going for different motivations. They go to like movies and plays, but that's pretty passive. They're all just kind of sitting there in the dark quietly. But I thought, hey, they go to fitness centres. And I always went to the gym. I worked out. I thought this would be a great way. People be coming in. They're often pretty habitual. They come 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. If we can give them a great price, we'll set this up as a non-profit. When they join, they're so ignorant, they don't even know that we can say, hey, we're a Christian-run gym. Let me just tell you what we believe. And we took them through the gospel right there at the front end, So that's a great idea. And I said, hey, this is also real helpful for the churches, because we're not a church. But we could use this as like a train station where the trains are coming in. If someone comes to Jesus, I'm like, hey, we can play. Where you live, mate? Well, here's a good, So we thought, well, let's tell all the pastors. So we got a map out where we set up this gym, and I drew a big circle of about a 10-mile radius, and we went through all the churches and said, invited the pastors, hey, look, come in here. We ran it over 3 nights because you realise they can't all come in one night. We said we'll give you a free membership of the gym too, just so you can come and, if you're a bit skeptical of what we are, come work out, get to know us. And we must have invited maybe 120 different pastors. We called, said, hey, we've got this thing, It's only going to run for 30 minutes, just to kind of get to know you on 3 different nights. You know how many people showed up? 3. One was my own pastor, so that didn't count. I mean, it's in the church I'm in. Like, one guy was the pastor for probably the furthest away church that we weren't even going to really send it because it's almost so far. No one, if anyone lives there, they're not going to come to this gym anyway. And there was just one other sort of pastor guy. And look, pastors are busy, I understand. But you know what? It's like, this is a layup, mate. I mean, this thing is so easy to help your church. It's evangelistic. Just all you got to do is bring your friend, just bring them on, we'll give them free word. We'll share the gospel with them. If they come, you take them back to your church, mate. You don't even have to do it. And it was pretty disheartening, But it was what it was, Because I just wonder about it's the pit of parochialism. They're so busy, well, we're doing this thing. We don't have time to go check that thing out over there. We had to close our gym. We ran it for 9 years, and we closed it because me and my wife had an invitation to come up here. We were coming up to the end of the lease. We had to decide, are we going to run this thing for another 3 years, or we're going to close it? So we ended up closing it. Good thing in some ways we did. COVID hit just a year after that. New Zealand, I don't know if you know it just the government shut everything down, mate. Just would have been a really rough time. Anyway, the Lord knew. But I had a pastor say, oh, hey, we now say we're closed. He said, oh, you closed? Oh, I was going to come along. I said, well, sorry, we're closed. Oh, yeah, how long have you been going? I said, 9 years, mate. Oh, well, opportunity gone begging, Anyway, so that is the pit of parochialism, and it's another thing, a caution for teachers and preachers and running your own thing. Be careful, because there may be things banging on your door saying, hey, come and check this thing out. And you want to think about, hey, Lord, is this something we can support and get involved in? So let's look at the last thing, third thing. So we got the abyss of acedia, we got the pit of parochialism. It's what I call the trap of technology, and this is probably more for you younger folks. Times have changed since John wrote this epistle. Technologically, you could say they probably didn't have much back then. They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have computers, they didn't have the internet, didn't have digital cameras and video recorders, and they didn't have, PowerPoint, didn't have AI to write your sermons for you. But what they did have, they used, paper, pen, a guy that could take a handwritten letter from the elder to a guy called Gaius via a man called Demetrius, postal service. And I'm glad they did write those letters, because we wouldn't have our Bibles today, would we? They hadn't used the technology of the day to record the inspired words of God. But it's very intriguing to me if you read these last few verses in 3 John, verses 13 and 14. This intrigues me. It says, I have much more to say to you, but I don't want to write it with pen and ink, for I hope to see you soon, and then we'll talk face to face. In fact, again, in the NASB, John says, I had many things to write, but I am not willing to write them to you with pen and ink. It's a kind of an adamant, I'm not going to do it. I am not willing to write. Now, John was implying he could have written a lot more. He said, I've got a lot more things to say to you. But he chooses not to. Why? Well, it's foolish to deny that technology doesn't have some advantages, right? I told you I come from New Zealand. It's 8,000 miles. Mate, if you don't fly, it's a flipping long walk, mate, and an even longer swim. I'm talking on a microphone, helps you hear. We got air conditioning. It's great, So I'm not saying we should turn into the Amish and make our own butter and get rid of everything, but is our technology really helping us sometimes? Or is it separating us? I hear people say, no, I'm not going to talk to that guy, mate, I'll just text him. And he's not some guy who's miles away like my country. He's not 3 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand on a different day. He's in the cubicle next to you at work, mate, or he's your neighbour, or is that what we become? Socially, just isolating ourselves. The second thing that Adam and Eve did after they fell, the first thing was they sowed fig leaf or whatever. The second thing was what? They hid. They went and hide, And that's what I think, especially I see these young people doing now. It's kind of sad. I go out to the mall, I go to a coffee shop, and there's like 8 young people. They're all on their flipping phones, mate, and nobody's talking. I'm like, I joined a gym up in McKinney. I've been going there about 5 years. Everybody's wearing these flipping Beats headphones, mate, and I think I've had maybe 2 conversations in 5 years. Now, I understand. I want to work out. I'm not going there to be chatting, mate, but I'm like, what the heck, man? It's just, this technology, it's got some good points, but it's got some real downsides. It's isolating us. And I think that's why the Spirit, trying to transmit this over 2,000 years of still being relevant, is telling us, be careful with your technology. There comes a time when it's great, and there comes a time when you need to put it aside. And why put it aside? Because John says, I want to come and I want to talk to you face to face. And think about that. John's old, man. He's the elder, the old guy. For him to go and see his friend Gaius, I don't know, we don't know where Gaius was. It probably could be 100 to 500 miles away. There's no airplanes, no trains, no cars, no motorbikes, not even bicycles. He's got to walk there. He's got to walk down some dusty roads. He's probably got to go over some mountains. He's probably going to get rained on. There's no hot shower waiting at the other end. And yet John's saying, I'm going to do that. I'm going to come and see you. And we want to talk face to face. Why? Because that's how God desires to interact with us. God said, I talk with Moses as a man. In heaven, what we're looking forward to is seeing Jesus face to face. I don't want to get a text message from Jesus or the Archangel Michael. It's like, I want to see Jesus, man. And I want to see people. I want to be with them. And I think this is a great encouragement from John. I think the reason the Spirit inspired those words is because there's the trap of technology that we have to be so careful of falling into. In another verse in Genesis, remember Cain has killed his brother, and God says, where's your brother? And you know what Cain said? Am I my brother's keeper? Am I responsible? Well, you might want to rephrase that question. Am I my technology's keeper? Or is my technology keeping me? Is it keeping me away from interacting face to face with people? My wife, my kids, my family, my friends, my church members, my neighbours, people in my sports team, work colleagues. We want to talk face to face. And I think we've got to be real careful that we just use technology to enhance the mission, not to separate us. And don't think missionaries are exempt from this, man. I mean, I'm still in touch with a lot of missionaries, and I get their newsletters. They're always like, Bryce, mate, we're going to make this amazing app, and we've got this great website. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, some of the money they're throwing at this stuff is Canada Campus Crusade spent $750,000 on a website or an app that nobody even went and used. I'm like, but Bryce, mate, come on, you're the flipping dinosaur, mate. You imagine the billions of people we can reach. I mean, really? What about the dude over the back fence, mate? There's this lure that we're going to reach all these people. Really, if that was the case, then Jesus would have dropped the laptop out of heaven as soon as he ascended and said, use that to reach the world. It's not what he did. He said, go. Go make disciples. Talk to them face to face, one by one, one by one. Oh, no, but I can reach this guy in Mongolia, man, by this thing. Really? You know what some guy in Mongolia is doing? I mean, even statistics tell you, what are people going online to do? Ignoring just the fact that you Google to look up, hey, where's the plumber? 20% is social media, posting photo. Look at me and my coffee. Yeah. Video streaming, looking at YouTube, a cat playing a piano. It's like shopping, buying something on Amazon. Gambling, that's about 8%. And adult and porn is about 10%. That's what they're doing on the internet. So if you think you're going to send some gospel, man, they're going to find, that's it. You're dreaming, mate. we've had this stuff for 20, 30 years, and we're not any closer to winning the world for Christ on some of this. Yeah, has one guy said, yeah, he's responded? Yeah, but I've also led people to the Lord just over my back fence, mate, by talking to them. And I didn't need to pay any money to set it up. So anyway, those are my cautions today. I see we're out of time, but just think about that. Have I fallen into the trap of technology? Am I, fallen into the pit of parochialism? Or have I just jumped into the abyss of acedia? And John is giving us just some ways to guard ourselves. And how you do that, or how we do all that, it's recorded right here in that little book, 3 John. Let me pray. Lord.